welcome everyone to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, share, help spread the word. We're excited to have you tuning in. And we're also excited to have with us William Peng. He is the founder of Northstar, which is a FinTech company that enables employers to offer financial wellness as an employee benefit. Will, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Great. Doing great. It's a sunny day in Arkansas. Finally.
Very nice. And it actually rained last night here in LA, but now it's sunny. So swapping.
Yeah, exactly. Well, tell us a little bit about Northstar. So what is Northstar and how did that come to be?
Yeah, you had a great introduction, but to add on to that, our mission here at Northstar is to provide financial wellness, financial advice for the 100%. For the longest time, it's been really challenging for individuals to make the best financial decision for themselves. This is a problem that's very personally important to me. So we wanted to make sure that we democratize access to financial advice. And as you said, the primary way that we do that is by partnering with employers, leading employers like Workday, Zoom, Snap, and many others to give their employees access to both financial advisors, CFPs, as well as incredible financial management tools and an app to get their financial plan and manage their finances.
Well, talk a little bit about why you picked this particular area. I mean, you said that, yeah, it was personally important to you. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I was actually born in Taiwan, and I'm one of 6 kids, and kind of had the classic Asian American immigrant story. My parents moved us to the U.S. when I was quite young, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for them. The risk that they took, an even greater risk than that of entrepreneurship. They didn't know any English and didn't have very much money, and they wanted to create opportunity for me and my siblings. So was lucky enough to go to a great college, but graduated with a ton of student debt. So first job out of college, really exciting, was living in New York City, but had $0 in savings, had a ton of student debt, had retirement plan at work, stock options because I was working at a startup, and had all these different health insurance plans to choose. And I asked my parents and they had no idea what to do. And so I didn't have anybody to turn to. So I went to the University of Google and did my best, but still made a lot of the mistakes and learned the hard way. So what I realized was that my story is actually not uncommon. It may vary and differ depending on the individual's background, where they come from, or their financial situation. Maybe they're in credit card debt, for example. But the theme is the same, that there is a lack of resources for the majority of people, unless you're already wealthy and can afford a financial advisor, for example, to make the best decisions for themselves. So that's a problem that's personal, very personal to me, but I think many people can relate to. And I actually started my career as a product designer, and so a lot of our approach here is focused on a product-driven approach to create behavior change. But also in between being a product designer and starting Northstar, I spent some time as a venture capitalist, so investing in startups. So I managed a small seed fund in New York, and we were lucky enough to be a great part of some really great companies in the FinTech space. And our portfolio included companies like Coinbase and Oscar Health, Guideline, which is a 401k company. So I had a front row seat to the ways in which FinTech can solve this particular problem in a completely new way. So that's kind of my high level background and why we do what we do.
Well, it's really cool, and clearly there's lots of discussions about that financial skill set, financial literacy, making good choices at all points during your career. You mentioned about behavior change, and one of the things that I always think about is when you roll out these new offers for employees, how do you get them to engage? Are you guys doing something special there to get people to get the uptake to really occur and for the employees to be able to get the maximum benefit out of the service?
Yeah, I mean, with financial advice, it's kind of the classic vitamin versus painkiller problem,
Right.
where people generally don't sit around thinking, I need financial advice. I mean, unless they have a specific moment in time that they're looking for it. And so the question is, when do people have these specific questions that they need the painkiller? So one of those key moments in time in people's lives are focused around employment. So much like myself, when I first graduated from college, there are specific, not only transition moments when you find a new job or you leave your job, but also within that employee experience when you have specific questions that come up. So when you receive the offer letter, when first day on the job, when you receive all the information in your kind of HR and benefits booklet, and it's a dizzying amount of information that you don't know what to do. Maybe during open enrollment when you're choosing your health insurance plan, or maybe there's a ESPP window if you work at a public company. These are all times when people are specifically looking for advice. So that's why we love working with employers, because we're right there when people need our advice.
And, you mentioned having worked for a startup right out of college. How did that process kind of inform your entrepreneurial journey as you decided to kind of go out and start your own company?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, because you can kind of you can always tell a good story about, oh yeah, I knew the right moment when I knew I wanted to do this, but in hindsight, it's never as clean of a path. I think I just followed my instinct of what I was most interested in. There was a moment in time when I thought maybe that I actually wanted to work at a larger company and get that experience, but it was really hard to figure out what bucket that I fit in, because I'm a product designer, spent time as an investor, spent time as a product manager. So what bucket do I fit in? And in some ways I can't, this is the only job that I could be doing. So yeah, I'm really excited that I've been able to find this particular way to kind of spend my time.
As a follow-up to that, contrast a little bit about how you feel about being an operator or founder versus an investor, because I've sat on all sides of that table as well over a long career, and I'd just be interested in your perspectives on that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting balance, and I think now that I've been a founder, I have a lot more appreciation for a lot of the details that go into building a company that I didn't have when I was an investor. And that's not to say that I think that a related question is, are investors better when they've been operators in the past? And I don't think there's a clear answer there. There are plenty of investors who are incredibly helpful and great investors, even though they've never been operators. But I think it's about finding what particular focus that you have individually, and that's what distinguishes yourself from other investors. But I think what has been one of the biggest learning experiences as a founder is appreciating all the details that go into executing on specific plans. And it's so easy as an investor at a high level to kind of assume that things will get done easily, but that's very far from the truth. And then vice versa, as a founder who understands how investors work and they think, it's been really helpful to kind of think holistically about our business and our strategy. Whereas I think if I were just a product designer, looking to start a company without the experience as an investor, I think there would be a steeper learning curve as to how to manage capital raises and how to think about the other aspects of the business. And I think as a founder, it's important to think about business context as well. And this is something that I coach our not only designers, but everybody on the company to think about is the ways that you can level up as an IC or a manager or somebody in a specific functional role is to think about and consider the business needs, the business goals and OKRs as well in your decisions. Because since we're on the designer topic, it's oftentimes easy to think, oh, I'm just going to focus on the best possible user experience. That's the job of a designer, right? Well, it's not only the best possible user experience, but it's about, I think, building companies and products is about trade-offs. So how do you balance the best possible user experience with something that may actually fit the business goals? What happens when those diverge? So I think those are some of the specific themes that I found have been really valuable to have both experience from both sides of the table.
And then I guess kind of to build on that question I had earlier, is, you worked in a startup and then started your own startup. But then you went and raised capital too. So having been on the other side of that table, how did that kind of inform that process and how you approached, kind of that decision to go raise and how you approached investors?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There are maybe a few tactical things that come to mind. I think I understood the role of an investor and how they can be helpful. So making sure that we build a syndicate of investors who can truly be helpful rather than just be money on the cap table. And it's also about the ways that you run a fundraising process. So making sure that you run a tight fundraising process in parallel rather than talking to investors one by one. It's really important to make sure that you keep fundraising processes efficient. So those are just a couple ways, but happy to dive deeper on any of those.
Yeah, I'd be curious about what we've been reading a lot recently with. In fact, we had Jim Getz out at the Heartland Challenge, and he gave some interesting perspectives about the valuation reset and some of the discounting that's happening. And honestly, it'd be real easy to say that valuations on a lot of the tech companies, particularly in the coast, are pretty frothy. But you're kind of in it, and you've recently raised around and whatnot. What's your take? What are you seeing as it relates to valuations and the ability to get the interest of quality VCs and all that?
Keep up to date on the latest news in economic development with the Arkansas Economic Development Commission's Arkansas Inc. newsletter. Each month, get the Arkansas Inc. newsletter, which spotlights the latest project wins and developments throughout the state, delivered to your email. The newsletter features major project announcements, company expansions and relocations, news articles, rankings, and more that highlight why Arkansas is a great state to do business. The newsletter is a snapshot of what AEDC has been working on and what we are following. The Quarterly Tech Trends newsletter highlights the latest news in Arkansas's growing tech sector. You can learn about new Arkansas tech companies, computer science and cybersecurity initiatives, funding and venture capital announcements, and even more. AEDC offers 4 quarterly newsletters: the Food and Beverage Industry Digest, Aerospace and Defense Beacon, Timber Trends, and Tech Trends. To learn more or sign up for a newsletter, visit arkansasedc.com/news.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the unsatisfactory answer is that the best companies will continue to get funded. I think overall, though, I think everybody's kind of taking a pause to see what's happening. So the way that we're thinking about it is that it's obviously if folks are excited about our business and investing, then we'll definitely entertain them. But we want to make sure that we kind of hunker down and execute. And the more that we execute, the more options we'll have. in terms of, but yeah, we're definitely assuming that any kind of process that we run is going to take longer than usual, and will require more diligence than previous, and maybe the valuations will be lower than previously. But we kind of have to see what the market has to say. But if at all possible, I don't think we want to be out fundraising right now.
Sure, it makes perfect sense, and it's at this point it's kind of a buyer's market from the standpoint of the investor side, and that kind of is a good segue to another point is, as you think about your ideal customer, are you going after fast growing startups and SMBs? Are you going after large corporations? Talk a little bit about how you think about your customer.
Yeah, of course, our core base has a lot of tech companies, high growth tech companies of different sizes, from kind of startups all the way to enterprises. But we also work with customers in other industries as well, non-tech industries. It's really important that we can support a wide diversity of backgrounds and employees, and not just those who have high-paying tech jobs. I think the core need is there, whether it be the macro effects that employees are facing around inflation, or back when COVID hit around pay cuts and layoffs. And in fact, we have found that the need for something like Northstar is particularly resilient because of and we show this with incredibly high utilization rates. So over 50% of all employees use Northstar, which is phenomenal compared to any other benefit that exists out there. It shows the foundational need for Northstar, and so that shows that every single employment offer needs to be accompanied with Northstar. You wouldn't put together a piece of furniture without an instruction manual. So why would you get all these different things from your employer, from compensation and benefits, without an instruction manual? So, and we see this as a need not only with tech companies, but also with other industries as well.
Is your key economic decision maker typically the chief people officer, or the head of HR, or is it the CEO? Who makes the final call on your stuff typically?
Yeah, typically it's the chief people officer, the CHRO. What we found though is that this is something that the value proposition that we provide is something that is important to everybody in the C-suite. It's really important for employers to find ways to attract and retain the top talent. And one of the primary ways to do that is by putting together really compelling compensation and benefits packages. And not only that, it's how to communicate the value of that to employees and candidates. So this is oftentimes a CEO level priority as well. And then from a CFO perspective, it's about being able to scale that communication, but also perhaps save costs because employees are more efficiently choosing their benefits, or maybe they're getting more ROI out of other existing benefits because we're proactively recommending a relevant benefit based on some of these financial goals.
So what does winning look like for you, Will? Like what is the next 5, if you were to, envision 5 years from now, kind of where do you hope to be with Northstar?
Yeah, it's kind of what I said earlier, which is that every single employment offer needs to be accompanied with Northstar. And we've shifted so far into a world of choice, where we have so many incredible, not only point solutions in the fintech space, consumer fintech space, from robo-advisors to student loan refinance products, early pay. There's so many of them, which is really exciting to see, as well as a shift away from pension plans, like my father still has one, but to 401k plans instead, where the individual has to make the choice for themselves, or they have to choose the right health insurance plan. So this idea of choice is creating a lot of complexity and exacerbating the exact problem that I was talking about earlier. And with this choice comes a need for the advice and education to catch up with it. So I believe that this is a fundamental need for every single person who has a job.
No, that's great. And just as a point of curiosity, as you look at that total spectrum of benefits, there's the HSAs tend to sit on that borderline between financial planning and healthcare. I mean, they can kind of turn into an IRA. Do you all wade into that area as well a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. We help with healthcare decisions, which are one of the biggest expenditures for people and employers, and have a really big impact on people's financial lives, not only with the premiums and the deductibles, but also the out-of-pocket expenses. God forbid an emergency happens. And part of that is with the HSAs that you mentioned. They're an incredibly powerful tool from a tax perspective. However, they are incredibly hard to understand. And this goes to the theme that I was talking about before, which is this idea of choice. And if you remember a lot of the discourse around healthcare reform and HSAs were described as the benefit of having a choice. You can actually save for yourself and have benefit from great tax savings, but that relies on a critical assumption, which is that individuals know what an HSA is, how to use it, and then actually going to do it.
Yeah.
Which I don't think are fair assumptions. And so it's really important to us that, and employers, that we're able to solve those problems and communicate the value of what does triple tax savings mean? And should I use my HSA for my retirement, which I can, or should I use it for my healthcare costs? Can I afford it? And how do I balance that with all of my other goals? How do I figure out how much cash flow I have available to contribute to my HSA? So it's a big part of the advice that we often give, especially around open enrollment.
You know, it seems like an awful lot of technology-based solutions come out and they try to disintermediate or disrupt the ecosystem. It kind of seems to me that you're not doing that. You're actually aggregating the ecosystem of financial support, financial advisors in a way that is more palatable to your target users. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly disruptive because for a couple of reasons. Because point solutions, it's really hard to know which one to use and when to use it and how to use it.
Gotcha.
And the other thing is that there is an inherent bias with point solutions. I always say you got to follow the money. How do people make money? And inherently, as much as point solutions oftentimes like to say, "Hey, we're not biased. This is a great tool for you." Whether, and even if it's not driven by malice, which some of them are, but I won't get into those. It's still sometimes not the best use of your time and money to use a point solution. So it's not just about aggregation. It's about getting a customized plan of knowing when and how to use the point solutions that exist out there.
Gotcha. Now that's helpful context. Well, one of the ways we like to land the plane is you've had this really interesting journey. I mean, your life experience is compelling, and it's a lot about the American dream in many respects of how you laid it out. But if you could take all this accumulated knowledge you have now as a founder, previously as a product designer, as an investor, and you could roll the clock back to your younger self and give your younger self some advice, what would that advice be?
Good question. I would say I already lived this advice, but I think it never hurts to reinforce it, which is that you deserve to be there. You deserve the things that you think you want. Because especially for somebody who didn't come from money, didn't come from opportunity, it's really important to keep that reminder, especially in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I think I look at other founders who come from privilege, and the way that they behave is oftentimes substantially different.
Yeah.
And I think having that attitude, even if you don't believe it in the moment, kind of a more colloquially heard as fake it until you make it. I think everybody's kind of faking it to some extent, perhaps especially those who come from privilege, rather than those who have had to work harder to get to where they are.
Yeah, I would 100% bet on the person that has had to grind it out and that had no expectation that anybody was going to give them anything. And so that's why I'm always, first of all, I can relate to your story. And second of all, I think I appreciate it even more. And there's plenty of people that have talked about founders and startups being resilient. And I think the most resilient are those that constantly operate under the expectation that it could all go away if they don't continue to grind and work hard, and that nothing is guaranteed. So you're an inspiration to our audience, I know. And thanks for taking time to speak with us today. Where can the folks that listen and pay attention to what we do find out more about you and Northstar?
Yeah, so on Northstar, our website is northstarmoney.com. And you can find me on Twitter. My handle is WP.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. It was great.
All right, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Take care.
See ya.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors. If you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads. If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.